All right, so welcome. First edition of On My Couch. So this is a 30-minute vidcast, and we're calling it vidcast because what we want to do is to be able to watch it or to listen it, depending on what you're doing at this point in time. So the focus of this vidcast is people at work. So it's called On My Couch, and Sue and Paige, who we'll introduce in a minute. We're on the couch, and that's really about trying to have a conversation with an expert and an expert around a particular aspect of people at work. So we're originally thinking about calling the vidcast What Da, because in our careers at different times, we've all had the experience where you're sitting in a meeting and you're concentrating really hard and you're listening to an expert talking about a particular concept and you just say, what the? You know, how does that make sense? So hence that's what we thought, look, let's get together and so in the interest of a growth mindset and continuous improvement and lifelong learning, so some of the concepts we may explore in subsequent vidcasts, let's get together with people that are smarter than us, so hence Paige, and learn a little bit more about a particular topic. So what we want to do is learn more about the expertise, have a discussion with Paige, ask a series of questions, and hopefully it's going to help Sue and I learn for our business and maybe help you apply it within your business as well. So in terms of introduction, so my name's Damien O'Malley. I'm the founder of IMC Group, and what we do at IMC Group is we work with individuals, teams and organisations with a real focus on enabling effective change. My expertise is org development, capability, learning development, change management, culture. But within our group, we've got a really broad array of skills, including expertise in service design, strategy, corporate governance, and also strategic organisational leadership. So with me on the couch, on her couch, is Sue O'Malley. So yes, we are related. Sue's one of my sisters and also part of the IMC Group. But in addition to being part of the O'Malley family, she's a marketing specialist, strategic operational leader, seasoned practitioner with broad capabilities in strategy development, execution, and all around a bit of a guru when it comes to retail marketing and strategic management. So Sue, before we start, and Paige is sitting there kindly, so I'll introduce Paige in a minute, but what's one thing you've done the last 30 days that makes you feel good, might even make you feel proud?
Well, I think that the last 30 days for a lot of us has been in lockdown. So it's been quite an interesting time phrase. But I think the thing that I've been most proud of is sort of just keeping yourself positive and really motivated to keep going, despite the fact that at some stage it felt like that there was no end in sight. So keeping up the fitness regime, trying to keep all of those things that are really normal, probably that's the thing that I've been most proud of.
Yep, cool, terrific. And for me, something similar as well. So just trying to keep that fitness up, keep and varying the fitness a little bit. I've now got a new ergo rower, so I'm setting my new personal best. And the key to setting a personal best is start off with a really low benchmark, and then every time you row, you improve your benchmark. So that's my tip. Paige, before I introduce you, what's your achievement for the last 30 days? What makes you feel good in the last 30 days?
So I have just finished a full draft of my next book. And that's happened in the last 30 days. So there's a lot of planning before you get to the point where you actually sit down and start drafting chapters. But once you get to that point, well, for me, I find I have to just get on a roll and keep writing to stay in the groove. So yeah, I've got a meeting later today with my book coach, and that's the first time we'll be looking at the full draft of the next book, which is exciting. Awesome,
that's great, which is a very, very nice segue to Dr Paige Williams, who's with us today. So Paige is a international speaker, author and mentor, including her first book, Antifragile, which is a great read. So I've worked with Paige before. Paige helps leaders learn to thrive through complexity and challenge and change. A PhD in positive psychology. I'm laughing because I'm not sure how you found time to do all this, Paige. Postgraduate studies in organisational change and a BA in honours in business. 20 years experience in international business leadership. Paige's experience lies in making research real, relevant and relatable to the work. And so that's why we're pretty excited to have Paige come here today and fits with what we're trying to do with this sort of on my couch. Paige is passionate about leveraging the energy, attitudes and mindsets of leaders to elevate performance and help them feel well, do well and lead well, which is really critical right now in the current environment, as Sue talked about with her opening achievement. Using a potential blend of positive psychology, neuroscience, systems thinking, and her own research, Paige provides practical evidence-based strategies for leaders to leverage leadership, elevate performance, and create positive and purposeful impact, which again is critical right now. And we mentioned an author of a great book, and we've just heard about to become a author of a second book, which is sensational, and Becoming Antifragile, which is the book and what we're going to hear more about. In that book, Paige presents leaders with the possibility to move beyond resilience and develop the energy, attitudes, and mindsets needed to meet the challenges and opportunities we're facing. So Paige, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm glad to be your first guest on the couch. I feel honoured. Thank you for inviting me.
Terrific.
So Paige, after that fabulous introduction that Damien just delivered, let's hear the Paige Williams story and tell us about your career highlights and what led you to explore the concept of anti-fragile leadership.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to, Sue. So I think the first thing that I'll say is that I've been a leader. So I've come through the ranks of different levels of leadership. I've been at the top of organizations. I've had people and P&L responsibility, and I know how tough it is and the tough decisions that leaders need to make. And then coupled with that is my passion for research, for really taking the latest thinking that's coming out of academia and kind of pushing those boundaries. When I'm in research meetings at the University of Melbourne, I'm based at the Centre for Wellbeing Science. I'm pushing them by saying, yeah, but what does that mean in the real world? What will that mean for leaders in organizations? What will that mean for teams? And then as I flick into my other world and I'm working with leaders and teams, and I mainly work with senior leadership teams and CEOs, I'm pushing them to go, what's the evidence? What's your basis for taking this course of action? Whether it is, basis that's empirically based from the research, or whether it's evidence that's within their own system. So I kind of see myself as being bilingual. So I've taken that leadership experience. I'm very upfront with that in my academic world, saying, yeah, okay, how do we make that relatable and real? And then as I work with leaders and CEOs in creating change, in leveling up their leadership so that they can be better leaders, which in turn will make their teams and organizations better in all kinds of amazing ways. I'm kind of pushing them and saying, okay, what's the deeper thinking we can do around this, and how are you going to turn that into action in your world? So I guess in terms of my career, it's this, I call myself bilingual. I kind of speak academic speak, but I've been in the real world and I've been a leader long enough to understand the challenges and the inherent tensions in that kind of work.
Okay, so the anti-fragile leadership, what's the 60-second sort of summary of the key concepts?
So the elevator pitch is that resilience is no longer enough. And any leader, any team member, anyone that's lived through the last 18 months or so knows that. Bouncing back is exhausting, and we need to engage with the disruption and uncertainty and change that's an inherent part of life differently so that we can benefit rather than burn out and break from it.
So just building on that then, in your book, you highlight that traditional leadership models have not equipped us for these uncertain times. So that's a pretty powerful statement. What do you mean by that? And is it a case that we throw all the leadership models out? Is that what's the how? Can you just unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So, I certainly know as I came through business school and as we know, I'm nearly 100. So that was a while ago, but as I look at, as I'm back in the tertiary sector and I'm teaching at university and I know what's going on. I'm an associate of Melbourne Business School. I know what's still being taught around what good leadership looks like. Mm-hmm. And it is still this idea that leaders need to in some way carry all the answers, that the shoulders of the leader are where it sits. And that their role is it's not so much command and control. There's a place for that. And we've certainly seen that in the last 18 months. We have evolved on from there, but there's very much this leaning towards strategy and planning and visioning. And there is a role for that as well. So I'm certainly not suggesting that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Good.
But the reality is that with the pace of change and the level and complexity of disruption and uncertainty that we have right now, research is also telling us that planning beyond about 100 to 150 days is pointless because the context has simply changed too much. Now, because of that, it means that thinking that one head and one set of shoulders can come up with all the ideas and answers is also just not realistic. So this idea of the need for and the idea for distributed leadership has accelerated because of the uncertainty, because of the complexity. And whilst that's what's needed in the environment, what's still being taught in our business schools, what's still being held up as examples of good leadership, is still this kind of planning and strategy and this thinking that actually the leader is the one that's setting the direction, and it's kind of being driven by a small number of heads, hearts and hands at the top of an organization.
Okay, that's great. So thank you. So if we build on that, so you know, if I was interested in you know, which I am clearly in anti-fragile leadership, you know, can you give me some insights around how I might start to apply it? You know, so what I've heard you say is, yep, the traditional models around strategy and planning, really important. And also it's about this mindset around anti-fragile. So how would I bring that to life, do you think?
Okay, so I think one of the core principles around anti-fragile is the relationship that we have with disruption and uncertainty and change. And so there's been a lot of talk, you know, I've worked with, I've had to implement change management. I've worked alongside leaders doing the same. And we often spend a lot of time talking about resistance to change. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, understanding that change, disruption, uncertainty is just an inherent natural part of life, of our environment. If we can take on board that understanding, if we can also take on board the understanding that as complex adaptive systems, which is what each of us are, we actually need that change. We need to be stretched by the needs of our environment in order to stay well. So this idea that actually struggle that comes through the change that's being asked of us can actually be a pathway towards thriving, because there's learning and there's growth.
Yeah.
So when I say like, where do I begin with the anti-fragile journey? It's this understanding, letting go of the idea that when I feel uncomfortable, I need to lean away from that. I need to resist it. And it's shifting that mindset to going, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Where's the opportunity for growth? Where am I being stretched here? That actually doesn't mean I'm going to break. But if I lean towards this in the right way, it means that I'm going to take learning out of this that in some way is going to mean I'm going to be better. And that's the anti-fragile question. The anti-fragile question is, how can we be better coming out of this experience than we were coming in, even if that experience is uncomfortable and we feel stretched going through it?
Terrific, that's great, thank you. So building on that uncomfortable piece and then sort of picking up on some of the key themes. So what we're going to do now is just sort of give you a quick fire questions. So both Sue and I will ask you quick questions, because we're really interested in sort of, you know, building on this and unpacking it a little bit more. In your book, you talk about the need to do more with even less time, fewer people and reduced resources. So how does anti-fragile leadership, how does that help with that scenario, which is a genuine scenario?
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time putting attention and energy into is the gap between what we think should be happening right now with these people, or in my world, in this situation, and what actually is in front of us. So this is the kind of the what I would like to be happening and the reality. It's the gap between the two. One of the principles that underpins Robust, which is a set of principles I've designed to help leaders and teams and individuals become anti-fragile, the O of the Robust principles is about operating in reality. So what that means is that we're able to do more with less because we're spending less time in this reality gap. We're spending less time fighting and resisting the reality of our environment. We identify what we can control, what we can't control, and what we can influence. And then having done that, we take effective action based on the reality of what's in front of us. We don't spend a lot of time moaning about and bitching about what we can't control, because we recognize we can't control it. And the invitation there is then to let that go, focus on what you can control, and focus on what you have most influence over. So there's less time, energy, drama wasted on just kind of spinning your wheels against the reality of what's in front of you.
Okay.
So they need to adapt those rules to the workplace, because very clearly employees are going to demand more and more flexibility. So how would you respond to that question, or that reality
of wanting more flexibility?
More flexibility and the new rules of the workplace.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's two things about this. I think that COVID has really encouraged people to think about what's important, what matters to me. Now, the T of those robust principles, it speaks to tackle the infinite game. And what that is about is identifying what's the long-term contribution that we want to make, either individually through our work and who we are and how we show up, but also collectively as a team and as an organization. So I think there are two things that come out of this in terms of future trends. One is organizations, leaders need to be clear on what the purpose of the work is that they're asking people to do. And it needs to be more than just profit driven. So this is tying into that. What's the bigger picture? What's the contribution that we're making? How is this really purposeful work that we're doing? And the second thing that I speak to in the robust principles is this idea of the S, the seek collective wisdom, and that we can't have all the answers in one person. And so as we start these conversations around what's it going to look like to return to work, leaders need to understand that this is absolutely a dialogue. It's not one size fits all. And there are going to have to be lots of probably quite uncomfortable conversations. They might feel quite dangerous as leaders need to step back from this idea that they're going to be able to control all of the workplace variables around what this hybrid model of working might look like for each employee. So two things. One is be purposeful. And secondly, be open to these uncomfortable conversations that we're going to need to have as we negotiate what hybrid working looks like in the future.
Which is a really nice segue into another theme that you talk about. And I think you sort of referenced it a little bit already. Sort of, you talk about integrity, incentive, purpose as a leader will becoming increasingly important. Is that anything, you talked about that in terms of being the purpose and having those conversations.
Yeah.
So how is that going to become increasingly important, do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that has happened during COVID is, as I say, is there's been this kind of reflection on what's important and why. I think the other trend that we're seeing right now is you may have seen a lot of coverage recently about, the Great Resignation and how lots of people are going to make different choices about how they want to spend their career-based time. And so, for leaders to be able to articulate this vision, this purpose piece is actually what's going to enable them to keep the talent that's in their organization, because we know that, talent churn is a great, you talk about how to do more with less. Well, just don't let your people leave. Don't let your good people leave. And creating a compelling vision and purpose-driven understanding of the reason for their work is one way to keep your talent, because we know, certainly all the research that people like McKinsey, what's coming out through Harvard, is showing us that actually those high performers, they're the people that are demanding purpose-driven work most. So this talent war that apparently we've got coming in the next 6 to 12 months, if you've got a clearly articulated purpose-driven vision for the work that you're doing and who you are as a leader, that's going to help you keep the talent. That's going to be so important as things start to wind up again in terms of, expectations and productivity in 2022 and beyond.
The current environment's certainly been very uncertain, and there's probably a lot of fear in terms of returning to the workplace. So how do you work on that piece of giving your teams and your colleagues the confidence and sort of the clarity about what the go forward is and that everything will be okay?
Yeah, so coming back to the robust principles, the R of the robust principles talks about recruit your brain, right? And one of the key things that our brains look for is certainty, because we want to feel safe. Ultimately, our brains are basically about kind of keeping us safe, and certainty gives us that feeling of safety. Again, what all the research is showing that I've read in the last 3 to 6 months, and this is I've seen this mainly from Gallup and McKinsey, and it's coming from the US, because I feel like they're 3 to 6 months kind of ahead of where we're at in terms of that return to work piece. And what that is showing, and it speaks to this need for safety and certainty that our brain drives in us, is that people, leaders, organizations need to communicate clearly where they're at, even if that means that we don't yet know all the answers. So people want certainty, even if it's to know that we don't know what the answers are yet, because otherwise what they do, we know this is human nature, they fill the gap with their own version of the reality. And that may make it harder for leaders and organizations down the track to kind of undo whatever story they've made up. So far better to be proactive, to go out to meet that neurological need for us to feel a sense of safety, certainty, and control by communicating clearly where we're at right now, even if that means it's to say, we've got nothing certain as yet, but in the next 4 weeks, we will have. So that would be my recommendation to leaders at this point in the game.
Which is a nice segue into the thing that I was curious about, one of the themes, and this is the last question, right? So you're doing well, you might get the job. We'll let you know. So one of the themes you talk about is discovering how to thrive through uncertainty, challenge, and change. Yeah. So what would be your sort of how does anti-fragile thinking? Some great messages have come through already, but how does anti-fragile help us thrive through uncertainty, challenge, and change?
Yeah, so I think that there's two pieces to this. One is that, when we think about anti-fragile, we think of it on a continuum. So you can think from something that's fragile, that breaks, or that feels overwhelmed by the level of uncertainty and disruption, something that withstands it, that is kind of robust. Think of the metaphor I often use is like a lighthouse that's kind of withstanding the weather. Or resilience, where we're kind of bouncing back all the time. And then beyond that is anti-fragile. Okay. So in that idea of thriving, the first thing we need to kind of be aware of is, in what ways are we making ourselves fragile? Because until we address that and remove the fragility, that we're only ever going to get so far along that continuum. So I talk in the B of the robust principles about break the negative, right? So what are the things that are making you fragile? And in the book, I give a couple of suggestions of what those are. And then in terms of how is it that we benefit from this disruptive, uncertain environment, that speaks to U of the robust principles, which is use intelligent risk. And we need to go through this constant learning loop as we try things, put something into action. We then need to be thinking, well, what went well with that? Where did we struggle with it? We're not going to try and pretend that everything went well. We're going to, be very grounded in reality. So what went well? Where did I struggle? And taking those two things together, what do I learn from that experience? And then what will I do differently next time as a result of that? And if we live in this learning loop constantly, that's how, even as we're having these uncomfortable experiences that we might not be choosing, we wouldn't choose to have, we actually take something from them that helps us learn forward and be better. And so that's how I would say is the thriving piece out of this. One is that remove the fragility. And the second thing is learn forward, even as you have these uncomfortable and perhaps situations you wouldn't choose to be in.
So would you say then it's the idea of becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, and the fact that we're resistant to feeling comfortable about being uncomfortable, that holds us back from sort of embracing anti-fragile leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, it comes back to the R. It comes back to the way our brains are wired. Our brains are not wired to take us towards discomfort, things that feel, that are not pleasurable to experience, So we're not wired for displeasure. And so it's a very natural response for us to go, no, I don't want to do that. And for us to push away from something that takes us out of our comfort zone. But effectively, if we are going to thrive through an environment that's only going to keep coming in terms of the disruption and the uncertainty, it's going to have a different flavor to it. But this isn't something that came with COVID. All this stuff was happening before. It was just under the surface a little more. And so if we are going to thrive in this environment that's going to get faster, it's going to get more complex, the disruption is going to continue, then we really do have to kind of almost override our biological wiring. And we do that by becoming aware of it really early, and then becoming intentional about, okay, where do I want to go from here? How am I going to manage myself in this situation most effectively?
Okay, so if I was looking to bring you into my organisation, so what's the process? What's involved? How do you go about, I suppose, instilling the anti-fragile leadership mindset into an organisation?
Well, certainly for me, I believe it starts with leaders. Certainly my PhD research, it looked at how do we create systems of thriving in organizations. And when we look at that, leaders are the linchpin, because once we make the changes or help leaders change internally their mindsets, their attitudes, their behaviors, they have such a critical role in creating and shaping culture for the rest of the system, for the rest of the organization, that for me is the most powerful leverage point that we have. So I work with senior, middle, CEO, C-suite level leaders, so that actually I've tried doing it from the bottom up and it hits the ceiling. Mm-hmm. So this is the most successful way for us to create system-wide change, is to get that critical leadership mindset on board. And then you'd be amazed at how much just naturally then happens because of the ripples that come out from that different leadership mindset, in terms of, where attention is focused, where resources go, what meeting agendas look like, the kind of processes and systems that change, because leaders think about their role differently and they ask different things of their teams and of the next level of leadership down. So that for me has been the most successful way for us to create change, system change, in terms of moving it towards more anti-fragility.
Mm-hmm.
So
Damien, just one question before you finish that one. Is in terms of time frame, how long does it take? Is there a one size fits all, or how does that work within an organization?
Okay, so let's look at this person, individually first. So we never kind of get to tick a box where we go, I'm anti-fragile now. That's done and dusted, because anti-fragility is always in relation to your environment, right? And so your level of anti-fragility might go up and down depending on how much is being asked of you in a particular environment. And that doesn't have to be negative. It's important to acknowledge that, when you get that great promotion that you're so excited to get, you're being stretched out of your comfort zone. Now, that's in a positive way, but that still might leave you feeling fragile. And so how is it that anti-fragile can play a role in that kind of opportunity? And that's why I talk about challenges, but opportunities too, because they take us out of our comfort zone too. So look, individually, we never get there because everything is always changing and we need to be anti-fragile in relation to that. And really, when you think about organizations, they're just collections of humans. So, do we ever reach a point where the job is done? No, but that doesn't mean that we can't make inroads into that. And so really, it is a bit, how long is a piece of string, in terms of how much do leaders take on that mindset. We can be very strategic about how we shape culture, and I work a lot with leaders around what are the leverage points, your cultural leverage points, and I talk about role modeling for themselves as leaders, but the routines and the rituals and the rhythms that they can use as a cultural framework so they can intentionally be architects of their culture. And I've certainly helped lots of leadership teams think about intentionally crafting an anti-fragile culture. And then it's about, how often do you make those changes until they become the normalized way that things are done? So, in a big complex organization, it's always going to take longer. And what I encourage people to do is to create what I call islands of anti-fragility. So for each leader, you create your island, your sphere of influence, your island of anti-fragility. And if every leader does that in a way that makes sense for their team, eventually we'll have a continent of anti-fragility, like a patchwork quilt, that will join up. And it won't be exactly the same because, as you said, Sue, one size doesn't fit all, but there'll be enough through threads, there'll be enough of a trajectory that it lifts the whole culture across the organization.
Thank you.
Cool. Susie, do you have another question?
No, that was me. Thank you, Damien.
Okay, cool. So, Paige, thank you. We could keep on going. And as always, it's been really insightful and it certainly got me thinking a lot about the robust principles, and also the concept of anti-fragile. And the thing that I'm going to walk away with is that metaphor of the lighthouse, and I think that's a really, really powerful metaphor to think about, what we need to be doing differently in the current environment. So thank you for that. So Sue, did you have, what was an insight you got out of that discussion?
Well, I suppose in part I did a little bit of prep work, obviously, for today's discussion, and was all over your website page. And I thought Paige's Hub was a really great resource for people. And I would encourage absolutely everyone to go to your website and just have a look at the material that's there, because it was really thought-provoking. But as you said at the start, really practical, because it's grounded in, it's not just grounded in academia, it's grounded in real life experience. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do now, to go back and have a look at that all over again.
Terrific. So Paige, you get the penultimate final words. Any final words of advice? If you we're going to share this. Hopefully we've got people interested in anti-fragile leadership. What would be a tip? And I know it's much, it's hard to give tips, but I think one of the things that came through, from your work is it's grounded in theory, but it's very practical. Yeah. So a practical tip to help us bring anti-fragile leadership to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that question, right? If you read the book and you don't take anything else away, if you listen to this and you don't take anything else away, just take this one question. Always be thinking, how can I be better coming out of this than I was coming in? And I just want to put a little asterisk on the word better, because better doesn't always mean more. And we've often thought that in the past. And I think another thing that COVID has shown us is that we can't just keep doing more and more and more and more and more. So better might mean more rest and recovery, particularly at this stage in the game. Better might mean saying no to back-to-back Zoom meetings so that you've got a 10, 15-minute break. So please don't understand better to mean more. Better means, what does better look like for you? And then holding that question in a really meaningful way, so that actually we can thrive even as we experience these challenging times.
Terrific, thank you. And Paige, final bonus question. You mentioned right at the start, you're meeting with your writing coach this afternoon. You finished the first draft of the transcript for your second book. So can you give us a sneak peek? What's the second book?
I can. Have I got it here? Woo. So, I have. So this is the next book. Yep. The next book is Owning It. Why we suck at accountability and how to be better at it.
Right.
And the reason I'm writing that book is because what I find keeps us most fragile most of the time is challenges with accountability. So if we're going to remove fragility in order for us to become anti-fragile, what I see in leaders, teams, and organizations is that if we address these challenges with accountability, it will get us a long way there.
Awesome. Thank you, Paige. That was sensational. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your openness. Really appreciate you being the first person to be on our couch. So well done. Thank you. As I said, we're going to share this. This is the first of our series. Welcome any feedback. But our next guest is going to be Joe Clancy, who's a bit of a guru around service design, and also part of the IMC group as well. So we're trying to pick up on some really key themes and help bring it to life. In the meantime, if you want to find more about the IMC group, an unabashed plug for us, omc-group.com.au or the mobile 0402 146059. But that's the advertisement over. Paige, thanks very much. That was awesome. And I can't wait to read your second book.
Thanks so much, Damien and Sue. And if anyone wants to find out more about my stuff and my work, you can find me at drpaigewilliams.com. And that's where there's a link to the free anti-fragile survey as well. So it takes less than 10 minutes, absolutely free. And you'll get a personalized report about how you're going with the robust principles and how they're supporting you in creating anti-fragile energy, attitudes, and mindsets. So check out the website, the survey's there, the hub's there, and lots of other interesting stuff too.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. See ya.